Hi, everybody. All right, we're starting The Wishmakers by Tyler Whitesides today. Okay. The Wishmakers. For Chris Schobinger. Chapter 1. There was a genie living inside my peanut butter jar. I didn't see the warning label. Well, I saw it, but I didn't actually read it. I sort of remember glancing at the words on the lid. Warning, read before opening. But I didn't bother to study the rest of the tiny words crammed on the small top. I didn't think it would be important. How was I supposed to know that making a sandwich would change my life? 1 minute you're trying to make lunch. Then, before you know it, a genie emerges from your peanut butter jar and wants you to save the world. At least, that's what happened to me. I looked at the open jar in my hand, then again at the strange boy who had appeared with a deafening bang and a puff of smoke. He was on top of the dining table, standing on the slices of bread that I'd just laid out. At that moment, I didn't know that I was staring at a genie. The boy didn't seem like anything unusual, other than the fact that he just appeared out of nowhere. He looked 12 or 13, about my age. He was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, with a baseball cap stuffed over his abundance of black frizzy hair. The boy was rather scrawny, had dark skin, and big, unblinking eyes that stared directly at me. Again, I looked at the jar in my hand. Where on earth had my foster parents bought it? At this point, you are probably wondering if the peanut butter was chunky or creamy. That detail is wildly unimportant. Don't waste another moment thinking about it. Instead, think about how confused I was to find a kid living in a jar in the pantry. "Hello," he said. If I'd known he was a genie, I might have expected his voice to be booming and ominous. It was far from that. In fact, the boy's voice was a bit squeaky. He took a step forward, slipped on a slice of bread, and fell flat off the edge of the table. "Yep, that hurt," cried the stranger, pulling himself to his feet and rubbing his knee. "Definitely gonna feel that tomorrow." As we stood face to face, I realized that we were almost the same height, though he seemed taller because of his curly hair. I was still having a hard time believing what I saw. Have you ever been so hungry that you imagine things? I once imagined that a doorknob at the orphanage was a cupcake. It did not taste good. Deciding that this was another hallucinatory hunger moment, I slowly reached out and poked the boy's shoulder. "Ow!" he said, stepping back. "What was that for?" I stared unblinkingly, finally beginning to believe what was standing before my eyes. "Had to make sure you were real." "Of course I'm real," said the boy. "What else would I be?" "Well," I replied, "I thought you were peanut butter." To back up my answer, I hefted the jar I had just opened. He said, peering at the container. "Is it chunky or creamy?" "You should know," I said. "Weren't you just in there?" "Well, yes," he answered. "And no, it's not exactly a peanut butter jar. That would be ridiculous." "That's what it looks like," I said. "Of course," he answered. "But that's not what it is." "What is it then?" I stared skeptically at the thing I was holding. "A genie jar," said the boy. "A genie jar?" I raised an eyebrow. "I thought genies came in lamps." "Lamps?" He laughed. "Where would I live? In the light bulb? Plus, you'd be tripping all over the cord." He waved away the idea. "Genies come from jars, like that one." He pointed at the container. The magic of the universe disguised it as peanut butter so you'd be drawn to open it. Genie, magic, universe. I peered into the open jar I was holding. It looked empty and vast inside, like a black hole. Definitely no peanut butter. Is this a prank? The boy held up his hands. I'm real, and I can prove it to you. He paused, then said, I'm a genie, so wish for something. Wish for something. Only one way to find out. I wish for a lifetime supply of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. What? You know I was hungry. I held out my hands as though the sandwiches might start pouring down from heaven. Instead, the genie leaped forward and slapped something around my wrist, apologizing in case it hurt. Luckily, it didn't. It was merely a wristwatch. I couldn't help but wonder why I had gotten a watch when I had clearly wished for sandwiches. Maybe the genie was hard of hearing. Maybe his ears were full of peanut butter. Oops, said the genie. I probably should have started with the rules. Now we only have 30 seconds, so listen up. I glanced down at the watch. The band was thick leather, but instead of numbers and hands, the top was a slender hourglass, white sand pouring from the upper chamber to the bottom. It didn't seem like a smooth design. Now I had a 3-inch tall hourglass poking up from my wrist. What if I wanted to put my hand in my pocket or reach inside a cookie jar? Okay, said the boy genie. The world exists in a state of balance. Whenever you make a wish, the universe has to give you a consequence to go with it. Wait a minute, I said, feeling cheated. Aren't wishes supposed to be free? The genie shook his head. The universe has to keep things in balance. He pointed to my wrist. The hourglass watch shows you exactly how long you have to accept or decline the consequences before the wish expires. Glancing back down, I saw that the top chamber of the little hourglass was already half empty. A more positive person would have said that the bottom chamber was already half full. Either way, I was running out of time. You wished for a lifetime supply of sandwiches, said the genie. If you want that wish to come true, you have to accept the consequence. Which is? I asked. You have a smudge of peanut butter on your cheek. I instinctively reached up, wiping both sides of my face. I do? Well, not yet, said the boy. That's the consequence. You'll have a smudge of peanut butter on your right cheek, next to your mouth. I'll just wipe it off, I argued. It doesn't work like that. Wipe it off and it will instantly reappear. How big is this smudge supposed to be? I asked. Just a skiff, he answered, holding up his fingers to show a length shorter than an inch. But it'll last a year. Do you accept? A lifetime supply of sandwiches in exchange for a smudge of peanut butter on my cheek. I doubted the scrawny kid in my kitchen could make either of those things happen. Again, only one way to find out. Sure, I said, taunting him. Prove it. You have to say the magic word. Really? I muttered. There's a magic word. You have to say it every time you make a wish so that the universe knows you accept the consequence, he answered, or he explained. It's like giving your final answer on a game show. I glanced at my hourglass watch. There wasn't much sand left. What's the word? I asked. Bazang, he said. Bazang? I repeated. And just like that, I was surrounded by peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Chapter 2. Here's a picture to start Chapter 2. You can see the peanut butter smudge on his cheek. When I wished for a lifetime supply of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I sort of thought they'd be delivered to me over the course of my life. Nope, I got them all at once. There were thousands of sandwiches, each individually wrapped in a little plastic bag. The entire kitchen was full, probably the entire house. I was up to my armpits in them, and the boy who'd granted my wish was trying to wade toward me. It had settled one thing. The kid was a genie. A real genie. And now I had a lot of sandwiches. I locked eyes with the boy. He made a conspicuous gesture as though wiping at something on his cheek. It was the kind of gesture that made me do the same. As soon as my fingers touched my right cheek, I felt the promised smear of peanut butter. For the next few seconds, I tried to wipe it off. It felt slightly dried and crusty, but as I felt it flaking away, more appeared. It's useless, the boy said, practically swimming through the sandwiches to reach me. You can't get rid of a consequence. As I lowered my hand in defeat, I noticed that the watch he'd given me had changed. The hourglass seemed to have collapsed, folding paper thin across the leather band. The shiny top of the hourglass now looked very much like a regular watch, with numbers displayed on the face. I'm Ace, I said, reaching out for a handshake. What's your name? Ridge, he answered, giving me a high five. Your name is Ridge, I clarified. I can't say it was the strangest name I'd ever heard. I once met someone who went by Wiggy. Yeah, he said, genies get their names from wherever their jar was originally discovered. Someone found you on a ridge, I asked. Like the top of a mountain? I guess, he said. That seems dangerous. What were you doing up there? He shrugged. I don't know. I was in a jar. You can't get out of the jar on your own? I asked. Nope, said Ridge. It takes a wishmaker. A wishmaker? I asked. Ridge nodded. Whoever opens my jar becomes the wishmaker. He pointed at me. That's you now. I was a wishmaker. I had a genie. And I just wasted one of my wishes on sandwiches? Are these supposed to last a lifetime? I said. I set the peanut butter jar on top of the pile and picked up the nearest sandwich. I took it as a good sign that there were so many. Didn't that mean I was going to live a long time? Or maybe I was destined to eat them quickly. It would have been a lot nicer to get a few delivered each day, I pointed out. You should have mentioned that when you wished, said Ridge. Won't these go bad before I have the chance to eat them all? I didn't want moldy bread. The sandwiches are magically preserved, the genie said. They won't spoil. Peeling away the bag, I began chowing down. So what now? Ridge looked at me as though it was obvious. We begin the quest. Quest? I raised one eyebrow. What quest? Didn't you read the warning label on my jar? He asked. Right, that. I was too hungry to read, I said, scouring the mounds of sandwiches for the jar's lid. The lid's gone, Ridge said, realizing what I must have been searching for. It puffed into smoke as soon as you opened the jar. Then how am I supposed to read the warning label? I cried. It's a little late for that, Ridge said calmly. The universe likes to warn the wishmakers about what they're getting themselves into, but if you didn't read the label... Who is this universe you keep talking about? I cut him off. Not who, said Ridge. The universe is the force that grants the wishes. Well, I had to admit the universe actually made a pretty good PB&J. And it's your job to give the consequences? I asked. Ridge shook his head, eyes wide. Not me. The universe does that too. It has to keep things in balance, he explained Ridge. The natural choices you make every day bring about natural consequences. Same thing applies to wishes. It's just that wishes aren't really natural, so some of the consequences can be rather strange. So the next 2 wishes I make will also come with consequences, I clarified. Not just the next 2, he answered. All of them. Wait, I said. I get more than 3 wishes? Of course, Ridge replied. You have unlimited wishes, and you get 30 seconds on the hourglass to decide if you want to take the consequence. What happens if I don't accept? I asked. Life goes on as normal, said the genie, but you don't get your wish. And believe me, you'll need wishes to complete your quest. Oh, right. So what is this quest? I asked. Ridge grimaced. It's a big one. I don't know if the universe has ever assigned a quest with a consequence as big as this one. Wait a minute. Quests have consequences too? I asked, finishing the first of my countless sandwiches. Oh yeah, answered Ridge. The warning label on the lid explained that. When you open the jar, you get unlimited wishes. To balance this, the universe gave you a quest. And if you don't complete the quest, there'll be a nasty consequence. Like what? I asked. Peanut butter in my eye? It's different every time, said Ridge. Most wish makers have simpler quests. With simpler consequences, I finished for him. Ridge nodded. They're still bad. Don't get me wrong. Usually failing a quest means a neighborhood will burn down, or a city will get hit by a tsunami, or dolphins go extinct. But in your case, he looked grim. Well, if you don't complete the universe's quest, then all the cats and dogs in the world will turn into zombies and destroy mankind. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. All pets would turn into zombies. He had to be joking, right? How do you make this stuff up? I rolled my eyes. I don't, said Ridge. That's the consequence that will occur if you fail to complete your quest. Luckily, I don't have any pets, I said. This isn't just about you, said Ridge. We're talking about every human being on Earth. I didn't want to believe him. It was hard to imagine cute little kitties craving brains. But I hadn't believed him about the sandwiches either, and now I was practically swimming in them. Only you can stop this from happening, Ace, said my genie. You have 7 days to complete the quest. I took a deep breath. All right. What do I have to do? Chapter 3. Ridge bounced up on his toes, sending a rippling wave through the sea of sandwiches. He seemed excited by the idea that we were going to try to save the world. I don't know why his excitement struck me as odd. You would be excited about saving the world too, right? There's a very mean person out there, Ridge said, trying to find the undiscovered genie jar. Your quest is to stop him from opening that jar. I nodded. That seemed totally doable. What's this bad guy's name? Thackeray Anderson, said Ridge. Zachary Anderson, I clarified. No, said Ridge. His name is Thackeray Anderson. Why are you saying it that way? I asked. That's his name. That's how it's pronounced, he answered. Thackeray Anderson? I repeated, giggling at the way I sounded. Go ahead. You try to say it out loud. It's funny, right? Yep, Ridge said, with a TH. Where is he now? It seemed like a perfectly good question. If I needed to stop someone, I'd have to find him first. Ridge shrugged. I don't know. Can you tell me anything about him? Again, Ridge shrugged cluelessly. Not really. For a genie, I said, you sure don't know very much. All I know is what the universe tells me, said Ridge. I'm simply a middleman. You make a wish, the universe grants it, and gives you a consequence. I'm just here to explain things. You've hardly explained anything, I pointed out. I thought genies were supposed to be all wise and powerful, but you look an awful lot like a regular kid. All genies look like kids, he answered. At least all the ones I know about. Sure, some genies have been around for a really long time, but that doesn't mean we get older. 2 kids trying to save the world, I muttered. I don't think I'm cut out for this. I know it seems like a lot, Ridge said, but the universe wouldn't give you a genie if it didn't believe in you. We're only talking about the fate of the world here. You'll probably do fine. Right. I took a deep breath and straightened up. I can do it. I've got unlimited wishes. I've got a genie. I turned to Ridge. You've done this before. You've got experience. He began to nod slowly. Ha! Absolutely. Saving the world is my kind of thing. Good, I said, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll be relying on you a lot. I mean, how am I supposed to stop this Thackeray person if I don't even know where to start looking? Well, let's start with what we do know, Ridge said. Thackeray has to be a kid. I can tell you that. How can you be sure? Genie jars can only be opened by kids, Ridge said. That's one thing I know. This Thackeray character will probably be under 13 years old. That was something to go on, at least. Is he in the city? I asked. Lincoln, Nebraska seems like a pretty big place to me. In the 3 years I'd lived here, I certainly hadn't met every resident. I've told you everything I know about him, said Ridge. This is impossible, I said. Aren't there like 7 billion people in the world? He could be any one of them. Ridge leaned over and picked up the peanut butter jar from the pile of sandwiches. He held it out to me. Maybe it's time you start wishing for some answers. Do I have to hold the jar to make a wish? I asked, taking it from his hand. Well, no, he said. Technically, you don't need the jar at all, though it should come in handy from time to time, so I'd recommend keeping it close. What can I do with it? I asked. Before he could answer me, the door that led from the kitchen to the garage flew open. I turned, watching bagged sandwiches flooding across the threshold like a dam had broken. My foster parents were standing in the doorway. I'd been so wrapped up in my conversation with Ridge that I hadn't even heard the car pull in. Ace! Mr. Lincoln called, a broad smile breaking over his face. You made lunch! He waded into the kitchen, my foster mother right behind him. I glanced at the enormous piles around me. The man arrived home to find his house full of peanut butter sandwiches, and all he could say was, "You made lunch?" You must have been busy, Mrs. Lincoln said. You made quite a few. You think I made all these? I finally stammered. You guys have only been gone for 30 minutes. I turned to Ridge, my face twisted in confusion. Ah, Ridge said, I should have mentioned that the universe has a way of protecting wishmakers from suspicion. Who's your friend? Mrs. Lincoln asked, lifting her arm through a mound of sandwiches to gesture at Ridge. If the universe is really going to protect me from suspicion, then it wouldn't hurt to tell them the truth, right? His name is Ridge. He's a magical genie, and he's here to give me unlimited wishes. Oh, you met at the park, Mr. Lincoln said. How nice. That's not what I said, I answered. What was going on? It doesn't matter what you say, explained Ridge. People around us will only hear and see what makes sense to them. We'll be in the living room if you need us, Ace, Mr. Lincoln said, taking his wife's hand and pressing through the sandwiches. I watched speechlessly until they were almost out of sight. I have to go, I suddenly blurted, causing Mr. and Mrs. Lincoln to halt and look back. I've been given a quest to save the world, I explained, so I'm going to be gone for a week or so. Oh, I've been saying Lincoln, it's Linden. Oops. The Lindens smiled at me. Summer camp! That sounds like a great opportunity, Mr. Linden said. Have so much fun. And be safe, added Mrs. Linden. The universe was clearly casting some pretty heavy magic over them. Okay, I muttered, unsure how to respond as the two adults moved into the living room. You'll be grateful for that, said Ridge. Wishing can get pretty magical. It's a lot easier to have the universe shielding us from unwanted attention. It'll help us stop Thackeray without interference. With the Lindens taken care of, I decided to turn my attention to my quest. I'd need to find Thackeray if I wanted to stop him from getting that undiscovered genie jar. And if I could wish for anything... I wish to teleport to wherever Thackeray Anderson is right now. I felt a click on my wrist, and I looked down to see the hourglass pop up again. Okay, Ridge said. If you want to teleport to Thackeray Anderson, then you'll have to accept the consequence that goes along with the wish. Which is, I prompted, your legs will permanently be replaced with pogo sticks. What? I shouted. I'd seen kids bouncing around on those spring-loaded pogo sticks. They looked like fun, but I didn't want to have them in place of legs. The swap will be painless, Ridge said, but that wasn't helping the situation. No, I do not accept, I cried. As soon as I turned the consequence down, my hourglass collapsed into a regular watch, and Ridge shrugged. Permanent pogo stick legs, I said. You can tell the universe that seems like a bit much, just to teleport myself. I thought these consequences were supposed to be balanced. Oh, I forgot to mention that, Ridge said, holding up a finger. Whenever you wish for something directly related to your quest, the universe holds that at a higher value. The consequences can get pretty steep. I parted the sea of sandwiches and looked down at my legs, grateful that they were still legs. Pogo sticks, I muttered. That's so random. How does that balance against my wish to teleport anyway? The consequences don't necessarily have anything to do with the wish, Ridge answered. Since making wishes gives you certain advantages, the consequences are meant to disadvantage. Wishes aren't exactly natural, so the universe's consequences are kind of random. And wishes that will help me get closer to stopping Thackeray Anderson are going to come with bigger disadvantages? I asked. Exactly, answered Ridge. So I have to stop Thackeray without ever wishing to stop Thackeray? Ridge nodded, his face sincere. That's the best way to do it. Wishing is tricky. If you wish to teleport directly to Thackeray Anderson, then the wish did all the work for you. Then what am I supposed to wish? I asked. Don't wish for things directly, Ridge said. If you make a wish that still requires some effort on your part, then the consequence might not be quite as big of a disadvantage. What if I wish to know where Thackeray Anderson lives? Ridge shrugged. That might be better, since getting to his house would still require effort from you. But I'm guessing that'll still have a significant consequence, since Thackeray is the object of your quest. Well, I could always turn down the consequence if it was too much. I wish to know where Thackeray Anderson lives. My hourglass popped open. If you want to know where Thackeray lives, said Ridge, then you'll never be able to find the Lindens' house again. This house? I glanced toward the living room where my foster parents had gone. After 2 years, I was certainly calling this place home. This house or any house that your foster parents moved to, replied Ridge. So I'll just wander around the neighborhood, looking for my way back, I said. What if someone else brings me here? Ridge nodded. That would work, but you'll never be able to find it on your own. Was it worth it? I liked this place. I was finally settling into my life here. The Lindens were good people. Maybe they'd even be willing to adopt me. If I accepted this consequence, I might never find them again. Of course, if things worked out with this genie, I might not need to come back to the Lindens' house at all. I might finally find my real family, my real home. My hand crept into my pocket, feeling for the only object I ever kept with me, the only object that was truly mine. My fingers curled around the tattered, folded card. My gaze was trained on Ridge, a genie capable of granting me any wish I desired. If I went with him, my greatest wish could come true. I might finally get the answers I'd been seeking for years. Bazang, I said, officially accepting the wish. I suddenly knew exactly where Thackeray Anderson lived. Let's go save the world.